we honour our ancestors and we thank them for what we received were their gifts. So here I am introducing you to the altar I've made for my ancestors. And indeed my partner has created her own altar on the other side of this beautiful cloth. So what was all this about with the ancestors then? Let's make it clear. The only reason I'm alive is because my mother had sex with my father and she became impregnated and she carried me in her womb until I was born. And the only reason my parents exist is for the same reason, that someone was impregnated by someone and someone carried them to term. So the fundamental reason why we honour our ancestors is for giving us the opportunity to have a physical existence on the planet Earth. It really is that simple and straightforward. And as I say in the series of films which I've made for the shamanic training, when it comes to ancestors, then I was brought up in the West, and it's people brought up in the West that are in the minority. People brought up in most parts of the world have a very clear understanding of the importance and the significance of ancestors, whether they might be living in Australia, Africa, South America, Asia. Most parts of the world have a very clear understanding about the importance of ancestors, and I've spelled it out for you. It is really that simple. So because I come from a culture which has denied and negated the significance of the ancestors, as a shaman it is my duty to share with you the importance of this, because, and I'm going to quote, if we don't have a conscious awareness of our ancestors, then what is most likely to happen is that they will run amok in our house. And the word house is used quite allegorically here. And what it means to say is as follows. Our ancestors were all human beings, which meant they had both wonderful and terrible qualities. They did great things, they did awful things, just like me, just like you, just like everyone. That's what it is to be human, isn't it? So one of the reasons that we honour our ancestors is because that enables something very powerful indeed to happen. By connecting with and honouring our ancestors, we accept that just like us, they made mistakes, and just like us, they need attention, and just like us, they like to be appreciated. It's a fairly universal quality, isn't it, this enjoyment of appreciation. And so clearly there is a candle burning on the far right, and I feel I want to talk you through a little bit about my shrine to my ancestors, my ancestral altar. So there is the glass, and behind the glass there's a little jug, and the little jug relates not to my mother or my father, but someone further up my ancestral line. That is the only artifact I have that represents that. Everything to the left of that little jug is representation of my mother. Everything to the right of that jug, up to the candle, is representation of my father. And as a simple little example, this is a pendulum that my mother used to dowse with. My mother, when she had a physical body, she was a dowser. She was also someone who cooked and fed the family skillfully, efficiently, to the best of her knowledge and ability. And so I honour that with a measuring jug. She kept our home clean, and I represent that with the beeswax furniture polish. There was always food in the house, and I represent that with these little walnuts and this apple and the chestnuts there. And my mother very much enjoyed living by the sea, which she did here in Sidmouth until she died in February this year. And so there is this stone, and this stone comes from my mother's and father's one of their favourite places, called the Byes in Sidmouth. I filmed there before, and on this stone it says being, it says thanks for being you, and it's got a heart with 3 hearts inside, big ones, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little ones as well. And there are other necklaces with the hearts, with the crystals. And I'm going to move over to my father's side now. On my father's side we have the ruler and the pencil, for he was a mechanical engineer and he did create engineering drawings. We have the ink, for he wrote many reports on such a wide, diverse series of topics as rocket motors, aircraft torpedoes and artificial kidney machines. And then we have incense, because my father was a churchgoer. And we have the knife, because my father had integrity. And we have the cross, because my father was a churchgoer, a member of the Anglican Church, which is a Protestant Christian sect, a large one in the Protestant Christian movement. And my father brought me up in the Christian faith. I attended the Christian church. I was a choir boy. As a teenager, I was confirmed into the Christian faith. And doing the work on my ancestors has reminded me that my ancestors come mostly from the county of Yorkshire in the UK, with also a strong connection over in Germany. So I can say with not a small amount of authority that actually my ancestors are Christian. And all this has far more significance than perhaps I might have realized until I started this work, which, as I've said, been working with ancestors some years, but this particular piece of work. So what happened to me as I was doing this, I was going through all 16 of the Change Your Story, Change Your Life films, adding a lot of detail on the description of each and every film, and doing all the processes which, for an interesting reason, I hadn't done 3 years before, but had been waiting for the right timing to do them now, with the understanding that I have now. A little bit more about the Christian faith. The first Christians were persecuted It wasn't an easy thing to be a Christian. And up until 5 years ago, if anyone would ask me, I said, well, okay, if you think about the world population, you think about all the Catholics and Protestants, Christians in the world, we're talking about billions of people. It's a huge number. Vast number of people actually are Christians on the planet, so highly significant. It wouldn't have occurred to me to suggest to anyone that Christians are being persecuted today. But listening to my sister, receiving information from my brother, and from my sister's partner, I'm well aware that Christians are indeed being persecuted in modern times. Indeed, Christians have been executed in hideous ritualistic manners. I'm aware of this. I've seen a few very disturbing images. However, I want to go back to my body, because yesterday afternoon I started to feel a real turmoil in my intestines, in my guts. My guts were in turmoil all yesterday afternoon and all yesterday evening. And just before I went to bed, I received some information. And earlier that day, I'd received some different information. And all this ties in. And it ties into the fact that my ancestors are Christians. So what I do every day is I come over to my altar, I light the candle, I use some incense in honour of my father's a churchgoer, so I didn't say enough about my father. Not only was he a churchgoer, not only was I a choir boy, not only was I confirmed in the Christian faith, I was also the bearer of the cross and the chalice and the tray with the money and various other ritualistic objects. When I was a teenager, I did these things too. And my father trained to be a priest. For very particular reasons, he never got to take on the full mantle, but he supported other priests. So this is all highly significant about my ancestry. And he also went on a lot of retreats. Indeed, the reason why I hosted retreats would be indirectly because he spent so many years going to retreats. And he particularly went on to retreats about how to learn to pass from the physical realms to the spirit realms as effectively as possible. Retreats around death and dying, he did a number of those too. And so what I do is every day when I walk past the altar, I do a little Korean bow and I read the words that I started off with. We honour our ancestors and we thank them for what we received were their gifts. So this goes back to the fact that they're humans and they do all sorts of things. And the point about honouring the ancestors is to realise that, like all human beings, they did things for which they are proud. They did things which were harmful to others. However, everything that happened, and this ties into my revelation when I was 25 years old, shortly after my experience with the mushrooms, everything that happens is right and just. Everything that happens is right and just. Everything that happens is right and just. And as mentioned before, previously I spent a good 25 years arguing against that, so I know how that feels. Having thoroughly moved on, the point about honouring our ancestors and thanking them, because what we received from them were their gifts. This is all the obvious advantages, all the challenges, any disabilities, any special abilities or superpowers, all of these things are what our ancestors have conferred upon us. And we can think of the story about the Sleeping Beauty and the baby that's born to the king and queen, and all the fairies come and give the gifts, and then the bad fairy comes and gives their gifts too. And what we understand from the spiritual perspective is that all gifts have their value. Our ancestors have given us the ability to have all the experience we're having in this lifetime, all the opportunities to grow, all the opportunities to have our asses kicked so that we can evolve and become who we are always destined to be. And indeed, those are the words that I end the 16 films of the Change Your Story, Change Your Life. It's so wonderful to realise that that's what all this work is about, all shamanic work, all spiritual work. It's all about just becoming fully aware of who we were always destined to be, and how our ancestors have such a key role in this process. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be having a look at what is going on today in the world and how this relates to the Christian faith, as well as a whole bunch of other things. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. All the love. Please like, comment, subscribe, etc., etc. See description. Thank you.